Aloha. I'm Representative Cynthia Thielen, talking to you from the state capitol today. I'm absolutely delighted to have Charles Djou, former U.S. Congressman, with me today. Hello, Charles.
Cynthia, it's good to be here. And it's good to be back in a little bit of a sort of my old haunt here with you again.
Absolutely, I know. I so enjoyed working with you at the Capitol.
Thank you. No, I mean, my first 2 years in elective office was in the State House, and it was really a delight to have been able to serve with you in the state legislature. You were one of my mentors, one of the people who showed me the ropes around here, and so it's nice to come back here, nice to chat with you again.
Actually, you set the standard for how we should be prepared for session, and ever since then, I've always talked to my colleagues to say, Charles Djou did it this way, that was the right way to do it, and he was absolutely prepared and made sure we all were before we went out on the floor to cast any votes.
Cynthia, you're very kind.
Yeah. Well, now you have been overseas for a period of time. Could you discuss that and so the viewers could learn about that?
Yeah. After I left Congress in January of 2011, I was mobilized. I am an Army Reserve officer. I'm a major in the Army Reserve. And the Army Reserve pulled me up to go to the 3rd Brigade Combat Team, 10th Mountain Infantry Division in Kandahar Province. I was located at Forward Operating Base Pasab.
Where?
Which was in Kandahar. It's the middle of nowhere. Kandahar Province is basically the heart of Taliban country.
Oh, wow.
It was a interesting experience. Certainly, it was challenging, not just necessarily for myself, but also for my family.
Yes.
And Cynthia, I say over and over again, if there's one person who deserves a medal for my deployment in Afghanistan, it is not me, it's my wife. She was the one who had to hold down the fort at home and watch the kids and do everything as a single mom, plus hold down the job. I only had to watch out and take care of myself. And something I want to convey to all of your viewers is that while I'm very grateful to have served and grateful to get all the thank yous as a veteran, I really want to say a special thank you to all the families, to all the spouses of all the veterans out there. There are 100,000 American families right now with a loved one in harm's way, and each one of those loved ones in harm's way has a family. And that family is carrying and shouldering as much of the burden of defending our country as any one of those service members.
Wow.
And
very true.
For me, I don't think they get thanked enough. All the spouses, all the children of those service members deployed overseas. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful, and I hope a number of them are watching today, so they can hear that. I was going to ask you some questions about the present makeup of Congress and the just the hostility that seems to be going on among the two parties, and I'm thinking that. I know that you had a very good way of dealing with colleagues in a bipartisan way in the House of Representatives here in Hawaii. And I was wondering what you would see as your role in Congress and how you would deal with that.
Right. Cynthia, I mean, throughout my career in the State House, in the Honolulu City Council, and in the United States Congress, for me, it's not about championing any political party's views. It's about championing the views of your constituent and doing what's in the best interest of the people as a whole. And one of the things that really disappoints me about Congress today is the fact that it is so polarized, that it is so partisan, that there are too many individuals in Congress who are interested in scoring quick, cheap political points on the 24/7 news, instead of really finding solutions to very complex problems facing our country today. And the way I've described it to a lot of people is that, Cynthia, when I was in Afghanistan, I didn't see any Republican soldiers. I didn't see any Democrat soldiers. I only saw American soldiers who were focused on accomplishing a mission. I think that sort of focus is missing today in the United States Congress, and that, in a lot of ways, it's what's wrong with our Congress today, and that there's too many Republican congressmen and Democrat congressmen, and there's not enough United States representatives. And that's the sort of approach and philosophy that I've always brought, whatever elective office I've been privileged enough to serve, what I believe is missing today and what I'm fighting to try and bring back. For us here in Hawaii, being an island state 5,000 miles away from Washington, D.C., I think it's even more important that we have a representative who can really work with both sides, who wants to cooperate with representatives, not just Republicans or not just Democrats, but works with both sides. And for me, for example, one of the things that I really was happy to be able to do when I was in Congress was I was able to co-author the Truth in Spending Act with former Arizona Democrat Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, and I was very saddened what happened to her tragically last year. And I really wish her and her husband very well as she recovers from that tragic shooting accident, or incident, excuse me. But that's the sort of type of representation that I've always approached every time that I've been privileged to win elective office, and that's the type of approach I think really is missing right now in Hawaii's congressional delegation and missing in the U.S. Congress today. And we can see the approval rating of the U.S. Congress today is in the toilet. I mean,
it's terrible.
It's absolutely atrocious.
Absolutely.
It's even worse than the state legislature.
No, it is
and
terrible.
I think it's rightly so because it is so polarized, because it is so partisan, and because we're not electing individuals who are more interested in finding solutions than finding and pointing out problems.
Well, I can remember your time here at the Capitol. You were able to work on solving issues, not on being a partisan representative, and I really appreciated that. And I find that in my mind is the way that we need to move ahead here on the state level. Many times, well, it's kind of a funny thing. I mean, people will say to me, in the district I represent, the 50th district, they'll say, you're a Republican and your daughter Laura Thielen is a Democrat. And I said, fine, we get along very well. We work together on issues and trying to solve things and make things better for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Cynthia, it's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about what's in the best interest of Hawaii and the United States. And that sort of approach is so lacking today in our politics, and I'm disappointed by it. And actually, I just wanted to share with your viewers, one of the things that I was really pleased to have collaborated with you on, and I don't know if you remember it, was killing off the Talivans, the so-called van cam program.
Yes.
Which, for viewers who don't remember it, 10 years ago, when I was in the State House, one of the first things that I confronted and wanted to make sure that we do off with was this plan where the state government went out and put these minivans on the side of the road with automated cameras, and where we're sending out traffic citations to the public, which I think was unfair,
and they
unwarranted.
targeted the poly.
Right.
They targeted the poly to get all of the drivers going home with the flow of traffic. No one speeding, but all the whole flow of traffic was going slightly over the posted 45 mile per hour.
Right, and that was a ridiculous program. And Cynthia, I think that's a perfect example where I was very happy to collaborate and work with you, but also work with Republicans and Democrats alike to get rid of this program that wasn't working, that was not well received by the public, and wasn't doing the public any good. And that's the type of leadership that I think is missing today in Washington, D.C., and I'd like to see, make sure we return back to.
Well, one thing that has troubled me since we lost a wonderful Pat Psyche, our U.S. Congresswoman, when she retired, one thing that has bothered me is that we've been just a single party representation back in Washington. And I don't think that's as healthy as having a variety of.
You're absolutely right, Cynthia. It's really important, especially for a small state like Hawaii, to have a bipartisan congressional delegation. When I was in Washington, D.C., Cynthia, one of the things that I marveled about was I found the most powerful and the most effective congressional delegations weren't the ones that were all Democrat or all Republican. The most effective congressional delegations were actually the ones that were split, that had both Republicans and Democrats. Because what would happen, and I think a perfect example of this is, for example, say the state of Missouri, is that the Republicans and Democrats may sharply disagree on the big national issues, health care or the war or taxes, but when it came to a local issue, they pulled together and lobbied on behalf of their state, for their community. The Republicans lobbied to the Republican caucus for the state of Missouri and the Missouri delegation, and the Democrats went to the Democrat caucus and lobbied on behalf of Missouri. What we suffer from here in Hawaii is we have an all one-party delegation. And because of that, we have no voice, especially in the U.S. House of Representatives, which is now controlled by the Republicans. We have no one talking to Speaker John Boehner or Majority Leader Eric Cantor. We're completely iced out, and that's makes Hawaii exceptionally vulnerable. And you raised Pat Psyche, who is the chair of my campaign, And a great example of what can be accomplished with a bipartisan delegation is when Pat was in Hawaii's congressional delegation. You know, one of the things that she was able to do was end the bombing of Ko'oholave by the military.
Right.
For those who don't recall, that was a siren call that people in Hawaii had been advocating for not years, but for decades. From the late 60s through all the 70s, people kept saying, we want to end the bombing of Ko'oholave. But Hawaii had an all-Democrat delegation. And the Republicans in Congress said, well, you know, we just ignored it, and nothing ever got done.
Right.
But when Pat Psyche got elected and made Hawaii a bipartisan congressional delegation, she was able to communicate to the Republicans and say to the George H.W. Bush administration, this isn't some liberal left-wing peacenik plan. This is a Hawaii thing. This is important to Hawaii. And by doing so, she was able to end the bombing of Ko'oholave. It was only when Hawaii got a bipartisan congressional delegation that we really got effective representation. I think we need that Hawaii now.
Absolutely, we do. Absolutely, because it's like one chamber in Congress. We don't have the input and the way to work with the colleagues there.
Right, right. And you know, Cynthia, one of the things that I was delighted to be able to do when I was in Congress was I got to know a lot of the members of the Republican leadership. I consider close friends of mine, Buck McKeon, who's now the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. I consider a lot of the leadership of the Congress good friends that I would look forward to being an effective representative for the people of Hawaii. But right now, unfortunately, so much of the leadership just looks at Hawaii that it's all Democrat. Why should we care?
Exactly.
Why should we do anything for Hawaii? And the other thing I want to mention, Cynthia, is that for a long time on the U.S. Senate side, Hawaii did have somewhat of a bipartisan representation in the form of Alaska Senator Ted Stevens. That Ted Stevens went to bat for Hawaii whenever the Republicans were in charge. And Senator Inoue would go to bat for Alaska whenever the Democrats were in charge. But Ted Stevens, of course, has now since passed away. All the more reason why it's really important, I think, for Hawaii to have a bipartisan representation in its congressional delegation.
Well, I think basically people understand that we need to have the both sides represented, because Hawaii, although it may have a Democrat majority, is not 100% Democrat. Thank goodness, because that just wouldn't be the way that we could move things forward here.
And if I could just add an emphasis or an exclamation point on your comment, Cynthia, people do understand that. And I talk to people all the time. Nobody says it's a good idea to have one-party rule. Nobody wants to replicate the Soviet Union. I mean, nobody says that was a really good idea.
Right.
But even though everybody is in agreement that bipartisan and two-party democracy are good ideas, you have to vote for it. You have to vote for it in order to get it. Ultimately, power still rests in the hands of the voters. And if you don't step up and go to the polls and make sure you vote and vote for a two-party democracy, we're not going to get there.
Maybe if we could move ahead on the national debt and the things that are concerning me on behalf of my children and grandchildren, and I'm sure you're equally as concerned. If you could just discuss that a little bit.
You know,
because
Cynthia,
you have the national perspective.
Yes. You know, Cynthia, you're a grandmother, I'm a dad. Like you, I know the most important thing to you is not being a state representative, but being a grandma. And for me, the most important thing is not being a politician. It's being a good husband and a good father. And what I'm really frightened about is that we may very well become the first generation in American history to leave the next generation worse off. Why? Because we are piling on this $16 trillion debt upon our children. Right now in the federal government, 43 cents out of every dollar is debt financed.
Oh my word.
43 cents out of every dollar is being spent for us today for the bill to go to our children. And I don't think that's right. No. And as I look around the world, you see nations like Greece or Italy or Spain, and they're being crushed by this debt crisis because of their reckless spending, because they didn't take care of their debt, and they tried to foist it on the next generation. And now the bill is coming due. I don't want the same thing to happen to the United States. But what I'm afraid of is with a $16 trillion debt, and we're adding to that with 1.2, 1.5 trillion deficits year after year. That's exactly what we're doing. You know, Cynthia, what's frightening to think about is that right now every single American owes $50,000. That's your share of the national debt. And that's not just you and me, Cynthia.
No,
I mean, that's your grandkids, that's my kids.
No.
Before my children, before they graduate from high school, before they get their first job, before they even drive a car, their federal government is handing them a bill of $50,000. And we have got to realize that if we have a lot of wonderful things in this country, and there's a lot of things that our government, I believe, can do and should be doing, providing a good education system, providing a social safety net, taking care of our environment. But we're not going to be able to take care of any of those things if we don't get control of our debt and spending today, because all of that is going to go by the wayside if a debt overwhelms our country, as it has countries in Europe like Greece and Spain and Italy. And that's why, for me, you know, Cynthia, I never ever forget that every dollar the government spends comes from a family like yours and mine. And we need to pay attention to this spending, because this spending, if we don't take care of it, it's going to take care of us.
Well, and that's basically what the House of Representatives under current leadership is trying to do.
Right, and we've tried to, the current leadership in Congress, in the House at least, has been trying to push, I think, some very sensible reforms. Things such as a balanced budget amendment. Every family in Hawaii has to balance their budget. Every small business has to balance their budget. It's about time that the federal government also balances its budgets. Sensible things such as a line item veto to eliminate political pork. That's actually something that the governor of Hawaii has. It's something that the mayor of Honolulu has. I think it's something that the president of the United States should have also. So we get rid of these needless pork projects that are filling up our federal budget. And if I could just quickly also add in here, Cynthia, you know, I know there are a lot of people who say, well, here in Hawaii, we get a lot of benefits from political pork. I mean, isn't it a good thing that we get all of these extra projects here and there? Well, the problem with political pork, Cynthia, is that you don't just get to eat your own pork. You have to eat everybody else's pork, too.
Yes.
And
if you have that system in place.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Because what happens here is when you insert a pork project for Hawaii, you are paralyzed from criticizing that pork project that pops up in Pennsylvania or in Texas or in Michigan, and you have to turn a blind eye to all of them. So it's either you take all of it or you take none of it. And I believe a fair, balanced, open, transparent budgeting process is better for all Americans, including us here in the state of Hawaii. And that's something that I've been championing and I fight for, and it's something I think that I hopefully look forward to bringing.
Well, and I just wonder if our youngsters in school are being taught in their civic classes, if they're learning anything about the sort of the difficult situation that our country is in. We've never really have been in this before.
Yes, yes,
and it's now reached such a point, and it has with, as you mentioned, Spain, Greece, Italy. We have got to get some control over it.
You know,
and just doing business as it's been done before isn't going to get us there. That's why I just think that it's so important to have a person like you and a voice like you in our halls of Congress.
Thank you, Cynthia. You know, let me also add here, you know, our country has run budget deficits before, and people, sometimes they ask me, well, you know, back in the 80s, early 90s, we ran monster-sized budget deficits. We seemed okay. What's the difference? The difference is that 25 years ago, when the federal government incurred gigantic budget deficits and we ran that huge, and we increased the debt by a significant amount, it was generally speaking other Americans buying our debt. Yes, granted, they were generally speaking maybe other American banks, but generally Americans were buying American debt. The gigantic difference that we have today is the largest single purchaser of our debt aren't other Americans, it's the Chinese government.
And that's scary.
Yes.
I mean, that is absolutely scary.
And again, I go back to, you don't have to take my word for it. Just look what's going on in Europe. And in Greece and in Spain and in Italy, why are they in such huge throes of a fiscal crisis? It's because they ran up huge debt, spent so much money that they couldn't pay back, and they became a debtor nation basically to Germany. And they have to go and ask the Chancellor of Germany for permission to do even the most basic things within their own governments. They are no longer the master of their own destiny. And you know, Cynthia, I'm ethnically Chinese, and it's great. I mean, I like my Chinese heritage, but I don't want my country to become a debtor nation to China and have Beijing tell
us
Americans
what to do.
No, that's not right.
No.
And the thing about it is we can correct it. This isn't necessarily, this doesn't have to be our destiny. We don't have to become vassals to Beijing. We can change this, but the only way to change it is to change the mentality, to change the leadership in our Congress today. And the way to do that is on Election Day. The power still rests with the American people. And it's still in the hands of average Americans here to decide whether or not we want to go down that path, as those European countries have, or whether or not we want to change course, right our ship. And you know, Cynthia, hope still springs eternal in me. I have a lot of faith in America and the American people that we can right this ship. And the way we can do that is on Election Day by electing new representatives and new leaders in Congress.
Well, and I think what people need to do is just take a look and say, financially, fiscally, are they concerned? Are they concerned for their children? Is this gigantic, unbelievably high debt something that they want to pass? To pass on, and then take a look at that and carry those thoughts with them when they go to cast their vote.
You know, Cynthia, if I could share with you and all of your viewers, you know, what motivates me to run for public office, and I know you share this as a mom and a grandma. For me, it's not about winning some debate. It's not about showing up on some TV program or some news magazine. What really at the core motivates me, when I had the privilege of being a state representative, a city councilman, and congressman, for me, it was the ability to get up every morning and be able to make this world just a little bit better place for my kids. And I think there's that sense is missing, I think, in too many politicians in our country today. And that is, they're more interested in getting that quick hit on the evening news. They're more interested in scoring that quick political soundbite. And they're not interested in really taking a hard look at the problems facing our country and worrying about how it affects the next generation. I'm really concerned that government today isn't caring enough for the next generation, that it's more interested in what's going to happen on the 6 o'clock news than what's going to happen to our children and our grandchildren. And that sort of caring, that sort of understanding, that sort of motivation as a dad or as a grandma, we really need to bring it back into our government, into our representation. And again, I go back to the way we can do that is by exercising an amazing power called voting.
True. Well, it's actually, I've always felt serving in office that it is a tremendous privilege, and it carries with it a huge responsibility to not do harm to today's world and to the future of our youngsters that are growing up. And I hear you saying that loud and clear, that do good.
Yes.
Do good.
And Cynthia, I know we may be going short on time, but if I could just add here, my parents are immigrants. My father immigrated to the United States from China. My mother immigrated to the United States from Thailand. I consider myself extraordinarily blessed that I was born here in this amazing country called the United States. But my parents, they didn't come to America because we're the land of government handouts.
No.
They did not come here because America is the land of government programs. They came here because America is the land of opportunity. My parents came to the United States because they believed in the American dream. And I still believe in that American dream, and I believe in the spirit of the American people, that the greatness of our wonderful nation does not rest in the halls of Congress or here in the beautiful state capitol building. The greatness of the United States of America rests in individual Americans, in the American dream, in the American spirit. And too often I see politicians, what they're all about is, well, how can we launch this next program? How can we spend this next appropriation? And that's not what makes our country great. What makes it great is that spirit of American individualism, and that you might not be given anything, but what you get here in America is an opportunity to succeed. And I think that spirit is really what we need to infuse back here in the state legislature, over in Honolulu, Hawaii, and especially over in Washington, D.C.
Oh, definitely. And the opportunity to work hard and just to persevere with
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
want to accomplish. You know, I'm so delighted to have you here with me. I'm glad you're home. I know your family is glad you're home.
Yes,
And I
yeah.
thank you for your service to
Thank
our
you.
country.
Thank you
I
very
really
much.
do.
No, I really appreciate it. And let me just say also that I am very happy to be home.
I bet.
There's not a heck of a lot I miss in Afghanistan,
No.
Cynthia.
No, but to have you back home and to have the family all together again, I know that's wonderful.
Yeah,
and I
thank you.
also thank you for your service to our country, not just in the military, but your time in public office. You've done a wonderful job, and I, as personally, can testify to that because, as I say, Charles, when you would come down to caucus, before we would go out on the floor to debate the different legislation, there was one person that was highly prepared, had done the research, was ready to go out there and sharing it with the rest of the caucus, and that was you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
I've missed you tremendously.
Cynthia, you're very kind, and may the record reflect that I didn't pay you to say that.
Not at all.
Thank you very much here. No, I really appreciate that here. No, it is a extraordinary honor to be able to hold public office.
It is, isn't
and
it?
for me, I view it as a privilege, and doubly so. Having served in Afghanistan, I understand what an amazing privilege it is that we have as Americans, that we can select our own government. And we are able to select individuals we believe represent our community. And for that, Cynthia, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to come on your show.
Well, thank you for being with me. And Charles Djou, a wonderful participant on today's Olelo show. And thank you, viewers, for watching. We're speaking from the state capitol with Charles Djou, and I'm Representative Cynthia Thielen. Aloha.